Hey Siri, can you cut that out? Nice! Welcome to a new episode of the Console Log. As you can see, I got a new toy this past week, the HomePod. Been trying it out the past week. It's pretty fun. Maybe I'll do a review of it, probably won't, but you can see that I have it, and that's all that I need to really say about that. Welcome to the week of February 12th through February 18th. It's been a good week of code. This is episode 27, coming up on 30 episodes, which is crazy. I'm a little sleep deprived, so if you see me talking a little bit slower, that's because my brain is working a little bit slower as well. And I have nothing else to say, so let's just actually start talking about what happened this past week in the world of JavaScript. So most people know what React is, and many people also know what React Native is, but what you didn't know is that until this past week, React Native still had the old React license, which was BSD with patents included as well. The big change this past week is that Facebook has now actually relicensed React Native with MIT, just the same as React, which is good for you if you're using it and you're worried about that patent clause before. Facebook also did this change from BSD to MIT for their Metro library, which is the React Native JavaScript bundler, similar to like Webpack but for React Native. Fresco, which is an Android library for managing images and the memory they use, so if you use that for an Android developer. And Yoga, which is it's a cross-platform layout engine which implements Flexbox. It's actually how you create layouts in React Native. So all these projects, including React Native, of course, are now relicensed to MIT. No more worries from anybody ever again in the future, because there will never be anything else to worry about. So this is good, makes things nice and clear, straightforward. If you are using React Native, you now have less things to worry about going forward. Big news this past week as well is that Ember, a framework that I don't really talk that much about because I do not use it that often. It's not really in my world that often, but I still like to keep aware of what's going on. The big news with Ember this past week is that it actually finally released the version 3.0 final. So that's really cool. What's interesting about how Ember releases new versions is that they are very careful on what they are actually deprecating in the framework and then actually removing from the framework. Because I want to make sure that if you have an Ember application, you can easily incrementally upgrade it as the Ember framework also improves. So the things that they changed in Ember 3.0 was merely to remove APIs and behaviors that had already been deprecated in the last 2.x series release. So this is a very nice gradual change that Ember does. The big thing that Ember 3 drops is actually support for IE 9 and IE 10 and Phantom.js, which is great that they're acknowledging that 9 and 10's market share and their impact on the day-to-day work of a UI engineer is not that big anymore. So that's very cool. Also with Ember 3.0, they also announced Ember 3.1 beta, which actually starts adding some features in. Again, this is Ember being very careful and considerate to their community at large, making sure that they are considered and not rushed into any changes that you don't have to worry about going into it. So Ember 3.0 is out, Ember 3.1 beta is also out. Very cool if you are an Ember fan. Here's an interesting thing. Have you ever heard of this thing called AMP? Accelerated Mobile Pages, AMP. It's a product that Google has been pushing for a while, and when it first came out, it was a major competitor to Facebook's Instant Pages, their in-app, very fast thing. What the AMP project sought to do was create a suite of JavaScript libraries that were fast and efficient by default for mobile phones. So this means that if you were a publisher, to be clear, AMP was first geared towards publishers. If you were a publisher, you could write a AMP version of your article, and it would actually be able to be rendered very quickly and easily on a mobile phone. So that's been met with controversy that I'm not going to go into right now, because the news that I want to talk about today is that the AMP project announced this past week that they are introducing a new runtime for AMP, which is AMP for email, which means that you can take the same tools and libraries that you're used to with AMP on the browser and actually now write that for emails. And of course, because Google always likes to dog feed / flex their influence, Gmail will be a first big email client to actually support AMP for email. And that's a little bit dicey because you have Google pushing this. It's not a proprietary product because AMP is open source, but Google is definitely 95% the main contributor and pusher of AMP. But what actually is cool to me about this AMP for email is that it enables some very interesting things that you can do in your emails. So they have some examples here. For example, if you ever use Doodle.com where you actually want to make meetings with friends, But using AMP for email, you can actually have that picker of the dates right in your inbox. So it's very rich experience right there. Same with Pinterest is also an initial implementer of the AMP for email client where you can actually look around for boards and interact with pins right in your email inbox. So I think in that sense, this is a very interesting thing because email is still to this day one of the worst things that you have to do as a UI engineer and things that I dread ever touching. And it's also just limited. It's just very hard to really change and push forward. So having this kind of be a kick in the butt for email in general, I appreciate. The fact that it's AMP is a little bit not as endearing, but we'll see what happens. If it makes my day-to-day life better, then I'm all for it. But it's coming. You can sign up to be an initial beta developer if you want to. So very cool. AMP for email coming soon to an inbox near you. Still to this day, one of my favorite things I talk about is Houdini. I know it's a magical topic, but the Houdini project, if you don't know what it is essentially a suite of new APIs that are being developed in the browser itself that allow you to extend and modify and create new ways of the CSS engine in the browser behaving. So it's similar to Babel for JavaScript, Houdini is for CSS. And the big news about this past week is Google has signified their intent to ship a new part of the Houdini suite of APIs that are being developed, of course in Chrome. And the big thing they're releasing this week is the CSS typed object model. So what does that mean? Right now, if you want to actually modify CSS in the browser programmatically, you actually just deal with strings the entire time. All these CSS and JavaScript solutions, when they get down to the bare bones of it, you're just taking some strings and you're putting it into a object in the browser, which is, it works, but it's not really efficient, nor is it good on any side because it's hard for the developer to make these libraries, and it's also hard for the browser to then read what you're writing and then actually implement that on the page. So this CSS typed OM project is to actually make first-class objects that you can instantiate to actually create types of CSS properties and ways to designate what CSS properties you actually want to affect change on an element. So you can see here this example where you have a transform object being created that you can then apply to an element. So this is very cool. Also, the big thing about this is a foundational building block upon which many other Houdini APIs are being built on top of. So this is a prerequisite that will block other things. So having this out of the way is going to be very cool. Firefox has also agreed to implement this. IE says, yes, we agree. WebKit has been silent, as they usually are. I'm sure they will come around in a year after it's already been out for Chrome and Firefox for a year, because that's how Apple do. But very cool. Houdini, get that sparkle on, baby. Yeah. Hiccup. Oh. So that's it. That is your week of links. Hopefully you learned some new things this past week. I'm still so excited about Houdini. I really just can't state it enough how excited I am about Houdini. Again, if you are not a subscriber already, please do subscribe. I watch that metrics far too much than my vanity should really allow for it. If you are enjoying these things, please reach out to me on Twitter. I will happily say thank you and appreciate and send a weird gif of myself doing a dance, as you can see here that I did last week, which, because why not? Definitely tell your friends about this show, because the more this show gets out, the more I can help inform people about what's going on. With that, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you again next Monday. Adios.